Legendary items are by far the most iconic and well recognized items in World of Warcraft. Legendary items as of recently have been devalued quite a lot, however in the legacy period of Classic WoW, up until Wrath of the Lich King, legendaries meant quite a lot. In fact, back in the day playing Classic WoW, on any given server you'd probably only have a handful of people with legendary items, and seeing one was absolutely insane. These people were pretty much server celebrities. In total, there are 3 legendary weapons that you can get in Classic WoW. There is Sulfuras, Thunderfury, and Atiesh. All 3 of these are incredibly hard to get in the game. The barrier to getting a legendary weapon in Classic WoW has 2 factors to it. Number 1 is the RNG. The extreme amount of luck that you need to get from boss drops and other factors, and number 2, the human element. Any kind of legendary weapon in the game is going to have an insane amount of backstabbing and competition and drama surrounding it, and just like RNG, other players are going to get in your way to acquiring a legendary weapon for yourself. But to start off, let's look at the insane levels of luck that you need to get Sulfuras Hand of Ragnaros. Now pretty much everybody knows what this weapon looks like. This is a 2-handed mace that is almost best in slot throughout the entire period of Classic WoW. There are some weapons that are later in Naxxramas that can beat it in terms of DPS, however for quite a while this is by far the best 2-handed weapon that you can get. It of course has amazing DPS on the weapon, but it also has an amazing proc that deals a massive amount of fire damage. The fact that a significant portion of this weapon's DPS actually comes from its proc makes it not only a fun weapon, but ideal for certain classes that can attack frequently. Believe it or not, but this isn't really a warrior weapon. In fact, this is most ideal for melee DPS that have to use a 2-handed weapon, such as shamans and retribution paladins, as the best DPS that a warrior can do is actually a fury spec, using 2 one-handed weapons. So they'll actually probably go to a shaman or a paladin in your guild. Now, although this is the easiest legendary to get in Classic WoW, that is not saying that this is easy to get by any stretch of the imagination. I say that this is the easiest because a large part of getting this item is essentially just having gold. The first step to getting Sulfuras is to get the Sulfuran Hammer. The Sulfuran Hammer is basically like an underpowered version of Sulfuras. It is an elite 2-handed mace that is crafted by a blacksmith, but at an absurd price. To craft a Sulfuran Hammer requires you to get 8 Sulfuran ingots, 20 dark iron bars, 50 arcanite bars, 25 essences of fire, 10 blood of the mountain, 10 lava cores, and 10 fiery cores. That is just to create the Sulfuran Hammer, and according to my calculations, this will be about 7,000 gold to craft on my server. So that in itself is a huge barrier to entry. But it gets worse than that. You also need to have an item called an Eye of Sulfuras, which has a 3% drop chance from Ragnaros. You will have to clear Molten Core 35 times on average before you get one to drop. So even if you get an Eye of Sulfuras, the guild then has to chip in to craft a Sulfuran Hammer. But if you get these 2 items, the Sulfuran Hammer and the Eye of Sulfuras, you can combine them together to get Sulfuras, the Hand of Ragnaros. The other big legendary is of course Thunderfury. Now Thunderfury is a very interesting weapon. The appearance of this blade is absolutely massive. The in-game model is pretty much bigger than any 2-handed sword in the game, yet it's a super fast one-handed weapon, and can even be used by rogues in their offhand weapon and not their main hand. Although that being said, this is rightfully used by tanks in game with a speed of 1.9. Thunderfury does good DPS, but it also has a bonus nature damage, one of the very few weapons in Classic WoW that not only inflicts physical damage, but also magical damage at the same time. There are very few weapons that can do magical damage, and this is one of them. But it also has an amazing proc that deals nature damage and slows the target's attack speed by a significant amount. Everything on this screams that this is a tank weapon, although sometimes this can get in the hands of some people that don't really need it. Now Thunderfury is harder to get than Sulfuras. Similar to Sulfuras, you need to get a rare drop However, not just one rare drop. To get Thunderfury, you need to get 2 rare drops, the right and left bindings of the Windseeker that drop from Gar and Baron Geddon in Molten Core respectively. Each binding has about a 3% chance of dropping, so there's a high likelihood that you could actually get one binding and never see the other binding drop. There have been countless cases of guilds that have been farming Molten Core and have only seen one side of the binding drop multiple times and never the other side. And considering that there's only a 3% chance of getting one of these bindings with each run of Molten Core, it's going to be quite a few weeks before you can get both bindings on one character. This can be one of the most frustrating grinds for a guild in Classic WoW, since even if they're beyond the content and the loot that drops from Molten Core, they will still want to come back and finish that legendary weapon, and unfortunately, very often it becomes an exercise in frustration. But there's more to it. You need 10 Elementium bars, which to be honest I don't know how much they actually sell for since you can't actually create them as of this phase. These Elementium bars require a reagent from Blackwing Lair, so I can't actually say how much they would go for on the auction house on my server. But I'm willing to guess that it's going to take a few thousand gold to get the 10 Elementium bars. After you have all of that, you need to defeat Thunderan in Sulfuras to finally get your Thunderfury. There is one more legendary in Classic WoW that you can get, and it is called Atiesh, Greatstaff of the Guardian. Although this is the least known legendary in Classic WoW, this is probably the best legendary that you can get. This staff is unbelievable, and I'm pretty sure Blizzard put this into the game because a lot of mana-based classes were getting pretty annoyed that they weren't getting any legendary weapons for themselves. So I'm pretty sure Blizzard responded to that by creating this weapon that you could get near the end of Classic WoW's life cycle. There's not much to say about this staff except for this is absolutely amazing. It gives you massive amounts of intellect, stamina and spirit, but also a 2% chance to hit with spells, an insane 150 spell power and healing, an aura that all nearby party members will have to increase their critical chance with spells by 2%, and also the most interesting thing on this is that it creates a portal teleporting you to outside Karazhan. Now that use effect is pretty weird, and I'm pretty sure that this was put in because Blizzard were designing to put Karazhan as a raid in itself into Classic WoW and not the Burning Crusade, as the portal to Karazhan was put into the Classic WoW game world, even though of course this was never anything until TBC came out. So this item basically just teleports your group to Karazhan, and it's pretty pointless. There's pretty much no reason to be in Deadwind Pass, or at least teleport your guild to go there, at least in Classic WoW. That being said, this is by far the most rarest legendary item that you can get in Classic WoW, and it has pretty cool lore behind it. This is the actual staff of Medivh, and that probably explains why it teleports you to Karazhan. So all that being said, how do you actually get Atiesh, the Greatstaff of the Guardian? Well, to get it is pretty straightforward, just extremely hard and takes an extreme length of time, assuming your guild can do the necessary content. To get Atiesh, you need 40 splinters of Atiesh, which have a 15% chance of dropping from Naxxramas bosses. The only problem is, there's very few guilds that can actually kill bosses in Naxxramas, and on average you will pretty much have to clear 300 bosses in Naxxramas before you can get the necessary amount. So what ended up happening is pretty much nobody got this staff before the Burning Crusade came out, as very few guilds could actually clear Naxxramas. It could be different once Phase 6 comes out today. We might see loads of mages and warlocks with Atiesh, but back then almost nobody had this legendary staff. So everything I've been discussing so far is only the technical aspect to getting a legendary weapon. There is one more hurdle that you need to overcome to get your prize. I think it's well understood that in the WoW community, the better an item is and the rarer it is, the more motivation people will have to get it for themselves. Legendaries are the creme de la creme, not only for their amazing stats, but also the status that they bring you as a player. In any given guild, you will either have a loot cancel system or a DKP system, but none of that matters. When anything with orange text drops in Classic WoW, these systems go out the window. The legendaries in Classic WoW will almost certainly go to the Guildmaster or the Guildmaster's friend. Even if you play the ideal spec and perform the best out of your competitors in that spec, do not assume that that legendary will land in your hands. There are only 3 people that get legendary weapons in Classic WoW. You have to either be a Guildmaster, a streamer, or a friend of a Guildmaster. Unless you are one of those, you won't be able to get a legendary. It doesn't matter how much DKP you have, how much DPS you have. Once legendaries are in question, all of that goes out the window. These weapons will only go to people that are in the inner circle. It's a club that you and I are probably not invited to. Ideally, legendaries, like any other item in the game, would go to a person with an ideal spec and that perform the best out of people in that spec. This happens with epics, but not legendaries. It's sad, but this is the reality. That being said, I wouldn't want it any other way. The fact that legendaries are so absurdly hard to get and cost so much money naturally cause a lot of awe and drama at the same time. This is what makes them stand out. Legion WoW completely devalued legendary items, and even a casual noob can get one from just some random boss in the random raid finder. However, in Classic WoW, legendary items are suitably legendary. On any given server, you will only have a couple of people that can actually get them. So I hope this video gave you some appreciation as to how rare these items are in the game. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel. This is vaulty, signing out.